let's have a heart-to-heart conversation here for a minute. Over the last couple of months, I've noticed, and perhaps you have too, that the content on the channel has, well, not been doing so well when it comes to views, engagement, etc. One thing I've learned in my 8 years of doing YouTube, as well as my over a decade of religiously watching many other YouTubers, is you always have to be doing something new, engaging, exciting to retain your audience and also grow it. And so as a car YouTuber, the perfect way to do that is through buying new cars and making content on them. So that does not mean at all that I am selling my 9.3, the 900, the Audi, any of the cars that I own. In fact, what that does mean is now that we finally have some more space, I think it's time to buy another car. We'll go over in more detail later in this video exactly what kind of Saab I'm looking for to add to the family. And I will need your help in looking for that as well as doing my own searching. But I will say at the time of filming this, I am very early in the process of my search. I've only been seriously looking for about a week, and I have found a couple of promising ones. And let's first start with a car I actually was hoping to purchase the day that I'm filming this and kind of reveal on the channel in grand fashion. And that is a 2004 lime yellow NG93 convertible that was at auction here in Phoenix. The whole auction setup was a little weird where they had the viewing of the cars. I had someone with me the whole time. So the footage isn't great, but I'm gonna supplement that with some B-roll and audio talking about more of the specifics of the car. So I'll play that for you all now. The biggest downside of this auction place was that you weren't able to bring in scan tools with you. And so therefore I was not able to bring my Tech 2, which meant I was very limited in what I could really look at the car while I was there. It did have a lot wrong with it, but it did meet some of the criteria for a car that I was looking for, as you'll see here later in this video. So first off, it absolutely needed an ECU. It had a few codes that hinted at an ECU. It also had, it ran incredibly rough. It barely idled. It was absolutely caked in oil all over the place, which those things all together weren't a huge concern to me, to be completely honest with you. The biggest concern to me, however, was the fact that the car had no coolant in it. I couldn't see any signs of a coolant leak. I couldn't see any signs of why it might not have any coolant, but that was extremely concerning to me. It also was leaking oil so badly that it was smoking pretty bad after only running for a couple minutes. Again, not a huge turnoff for me. One of the other big issues was that the top did not shut. Because I couldn't really bring tools in with me, I couldn't really diagnose that too much either. The AC also didn't work at all. The fans wouldn't blow. I assume that was probably a bad blower motor. The tires, it had curb rash on all the wheels. The tires were 4 different tires. 2 of them seemed good. One of them was dry rotted and one of them was pretty old. So the tires were pretty rough. It only had 1 key and the only key was in very rough shape. It had an immobilizer failure, brake light failure, nothing too major. I couldn't drive it at all like you typically would when you're looking at a car to check how the transmission is and just how the car runs in general. But it had tons of leaks. Again, couldn't confirm if the top went up or down. Cosmetically though, that was what really drew me to this car, was the cosmetic condition it was in. Fantastic shape cosmetically, relatively speaking. It did have a bit of damage on the fender. It was pushed in probably from a low speed impact, and a little bit of scrapes and damage on the bumper in the same area, and a little bit of paint fade on the convertible cover area, but again, nothing too crazy. And so this car actually ended up ultimately being pulled off the auction block for a number of reasons. They said they couldn't really tell me why. They figured it was a title issue. So I ended up not even being able to bid on it. But with all those issues I mentioned and a lot of that uncertainty on what some of those repairs would cost me money-wise, I kind of figured it probably is not worth it to bid on this one. There's a whole lot of fees involved with auctions as well that would have escalated that price substantially. So Unfortunately, it just wasn't meant to be. So when I went to look at that car, I was super, super excited. As you could see from the pictures, it was really promising. It was obviously missing a few things, but cosmetically it was pretty clean minus some minor damage. And you might also remember in a pretty recent video, I mentioned how badly I not so secretly want a lime yellow convertible. Any Saabs you haven't owned that you'd like to? Secondly would be, and this is kind of a niche one, but I've really been liking these cars recently, and that is a manual V6 or 4-cylinder, I don't care, lime yellow NG93 convertible. I just absolutely love that car. Love how unique the color is. I'd also love to own a convertible, especially when the weather is nice. But let's be more broad, because I don't just specifically want an NG93 lime yellow convertible. I think ultimately that's probably the dream project that I would have at this specific time, would be a manual lime yellow convertible. That one was automatic, of course. Let's be more broad, because those don't come up for sale every day. And when they do, they're usually not at auction or projects like this one was. So again, I do want your help in this search. If you do know any cars that fit all of these criteria, please either reach out to me via Instagram or email, and I would really appreciate any leads that you might have. So let's talk about what specific traits I want this project car to have. So number one, I want it to be something I'm familiar with. So what do I mean by that? I'm of course most familiar with the new gen Saab 9.3. So ultimately I would truthfully prefer an NG 9.3. That doesn't mean I'm not open to anything else. I would maybe consider a 9.5. I would maybe consider an OG 9.3. I would, if it's a clapped Vigan that's cheap, I would ultimately consider that as well, although those rarely come up for pretty cheap, and when they do, they're usually really beat. So next, I want something that is cosmetically clean. It doesn't need to be a perfect car, of course I want it to be a project, but it needs to be cosmetically clean. I don't want a car that has faded paint everywhere, mismatching body panels, some minor dents and dings. Typical 20-year-old car things are totally fine with me. But it does need to be at least somewhat cosmetically clean. Mechanical issues are welcome and honestly preferred. Mechanical issues to really any extent, I can kind of judge that on a case-by-case basis based on other things about the car. But that's kind of the whole point of the project car, is to have issues to fix. I just prefer that those issues would be mechanical, or I guess even electrical, as opposed to cosmetic. I really want a convertible. I've been wanting a convertible for years, so I'm not saying that I'm not open to a sports sedan or a combi or a different body style, a 3-door, 5-door OG 9.3 for example, but convertible is really strongly preferred. I also would prefer a manual, but given that it's a project car and the budget is pretty low, I could live with an automatic, but having a manual would be preferred. And speaking of budget, my goal is to keep this around $2,000 or less. I could probably go a little bit more than that if the car is, nice enough and would be worth enough to be worth my time when I'm done with it. But truthfully, a lot of the cars I was hoping to look at would be less than $2,000. That would probably include getting it back to where I live right now in Phoenix, Arizona. And that brings me to my last requirement, which the car must be in the southwestern US. As much as I would appreciate to buy something that's in Indiana or Florida or New Hampshire, logistically sending a $1,500 car across the country is going to cost more than the car is worth, and immediately put me well in the negative with this car. And my goal is not to make money, so I don't want to come off as that, but my goal is also not to hemorrhage money in the process of fixing up this project. So Southwestern US is a pretty strict requirement. So this does not mean by any means I'm selling the other cars. I'm going to stop making content on them. It's just supposed to be something new and fresh to kind of re-energize the channel and get myself and all of you excited once again. Not to say that people aren't excited, but I'm just ready for something fresh to really excite things around here. I do, of course, still have lots of work to do on this car and the 900. The problem with a lot of the work that needs to be done on these cars, though, is they're either things that I have already filmed repairs on, or they're things that either are really tedious, or they're hard to film, or they're not interesting to film. And so it doesn't mean I'm not going to film them, but it just means that sometimes the content for that or making content for that is hard to get motivated for. Again, I'm very early in the process of searching for a car. I'm not in a huge rush to find something. I want to wait for not necessarily the right car, but at least one that seems promising. And so not to say that my next video will be an upload of what the new car is. It could be 2 months. Hopefully it won't take that long. Hopefully I'll find something in the next few weeks. But as soon as I do find something, those on Instagram and Patreon will be the first to know before it is revealed on YouTube. So you want to make sure you're following me there. Those are linked down below in the description. The end goal for this project would be to ultimately fix it up and be able to save it and pass it along to someone new. Maybe doing a little bit of small modifications in the process, but we'll see depending on the car. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're as excited about this new car as I am. Fingers crossed we'll find something before too long, but I look forward to any leads you might possibly send my way via email or Instagram. But that's all for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see y'all in the next one.